And we're live. Hi, welcome to IDZ Live number 3. We've done a couple of these in the last few weeks, both on UX. Today we're taking a bit of a different turn in that we're going to be doing hands across the ocean. I think that's what we'll term this particular venture. But we have, of course, as always, in downtown Hillsborough, we have myself and Josh. Are you cutting to yourself? Josh? Nice to see you. How's your week been?
It's been great. I've been looking forward to doing another one of these.
Nice. Hanging low with Belle Biv DeVoe or eating papyrus with Billy Ray Cyrus?
All of the above.
Nice. Okay. Bob, currently in his Malibu beach house, mid-century Malibu beach house. I will hand over to you, and you can introduce our guest.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Keith, and really appreciate Keith and Josh in putting this format together. I'm Bob Duffy. I manage our communities team for the Intel Developers Zone. And what we thought would be really cool with this format is rather than talk about our tools, rather than talk about innovations that Intel is really having to do with, but show you what people are doing and talk to some developers who are actually leveraging our technology and in our program. So we have with us Lee Bamber from the Game Creators, and we're going to talk to Lee about what does it mean being an independent developer, and also a little bit about what it means being a developer like Lee, who is what we think an innovative developer and the kind of developer that we like to work with in our program. So we'll do a full set of this. We've got questions already set up from his community, but if you guys would like, please use the Q&A portion to ask your own questions, and we'll do our best to get Lee to answer them. But first, I want to welcome Lee Bamber. Welcome, Lee, to IDZ Live.
Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here. I have no idea what I've just let myself in for, but I'm looking forward to it. So fire away.
All right. Okay, Lee, so we're going to start with some questions actually from your community, so be ready for these questions. We've grouped them a little bit, and first we want to know a little bit about your background. And the first question is, how did you become a developer? Where did you start? Where did those independent roots come from?
Oh, it goes back a long way. My first computer wasn't even mine, it was my uncle's. And I used to just look over his shoulder and he would sort of play around with computer programs and not really get anywhere, but sort of, I got to see it from a distance. And then one Christmas I got a Commodore VIC-20 and it came with this huge manual. It was something like 200 pages long, and inside it you would have to type out these little programs. And at the time, I was 9 years old, I didn't know what the programs did. You just had to type it all out, hope you got everything right, press the button, and then you would see what you created. And I think it was a week after Christmas I'd finished that book, and I was starting creating all sorts of just made-up programs. And I think my first game was a text adventure. Which was all you could do back then. On the VIC-20, it was 3.5K of memory, so you only could do really text adventures. And then that obviously sort of lit the spark, really. And then since then, I did things like writing articles for magazines. Then I found out that the magazines would give me some money if I wrote another article, so I did a little bit of that. And then I moved on to creating whole games in my own spare time. And then later in life, when I'd finished school, I had quite a CV full of games, and I walked into my first interview and showed them this huge CV full of games, and then obviously I got the job straight away, and that started me off in a publisher. And then a couple of years of that, and then after 5 years I didn't really want to work in a big developer/publisher anymore. I wanted to strike out on my own. But before that, I was sent off to Lego for a couple of years, which is pretty cool, and that gave me the confidence to sort of come back, set up my own company, carry on doing what I enjoyed, which was creating computer programs, tools, games, all that kind of thing. And that was a very long time ago. I think I've been in business for over 15 years now, so I'm still doing it, which is pretty cool. So that's my origins to where I am today.
Great. VIC-20 was my first computer as well, and I remember that tape drive and that little rotary number thing that you'd have to rewind all the way to the beginning. hit reset so you know exactly where you were on the tape deck. So awesome system. So I'm going to intermix some of my questions with stuff that we're actually getting from people who are hanging online here. So we've got a question here. Do you ever get to the point in development where you feel it would be better taking what you have done and learned and then just starting from scratch?
That's actually a quick description of development. You know, no developer starts off with a vision and then spends 10 years perfecting it. They'll have thrown that program away about 1,000 times before they end up with the finished product. And even then, the finished product of the day is in itself thrown away, being replaced by something new and improved. It's just the learning curve of developers. I've been at it over 3 decades, and I'm still throwing stuff away. I'm still starting from scratch. It's a constant learning curve. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm still involved in it, because it's an ever-changing landscape. You know, you'll never get to a point where you are the ultimate perfect, I know everything. Because as soon as you do, everything changes and you have to start again. And if you're up for the challenge, then it's a great industry to be in for that.
Yeah, that's a great lead into the next question I have for you. I don't know if you've caught this, but twice I've introduced you as the Tesla of developers, because you're a little bit of this mad scientist who just likes to break the boundaries. But you're about damn the APIs, I'm just going to code my own way, and that seems to have what started you with TGC and some of the stuff that you've done. But it seems like a hard path. But give us a little insight on that approach to development.
Well, I suppose it's easy to understand, and Bob, you might understand it as well, in that back in the day, there was no such thing as tools and art packages and the things that will help you along in order to create your application or game. We had to write our own tools. We had to write the tool, and then once we'd written the tool, then we could create the app or the game or whatever it is we was creating. So, you know, that's built in. That idea that I have to create everything from scratch. And even if someone shows me with all these clever tools and middleware solutions, and I'm inherently not distrustful, but I want to find out whether I can do it first. And if I can do it my own way, it has two benefits. One, I got to enjoy myself, to get a challenge and solve it, but I also own the IP. I own this solution I've created, and it's amazingly powerful to own 100% of your IP when you're developing stuff. So it sort of works for me, but I come from that sort of era where you had to create it all from scratch anyway, so it's just natural for me to do that.
Yeah, I think a really good example of all of us seeing kind of that approach to kind of going your own way, trying to do something first, was in the Ultimate Coder Challenge that we did last year, where we gave you a depth camera, and you were one of the first people to have this technology, and you had this idea that you were going to create a 3D video conferencing system. And then just 3 weeks into the challenge, coding all night, you actually had something and you put it on YouTube. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Josh to go ahead and play this clip, and then we'll pause it and allow you to speak to it. So we'll just watch a little bit of this clip right now.
Sorry, we've got Bob muted. We're having some technical difficulties here. I'm trying to get Bob to unmute himself.
Sorry, I thought I clicked the push to talk here. So if you hadn't seen this video, you can go to see bit.ly/ultimately, and Lee has himself as a point cloud, and he put the RGB of himself mapped over that point cloud in real time to video conference himself into a 3D environment. So quite cool implement.
Here,
Let's roll the video and watch it for a little bit.
Great, wonderful. I think that's a taste of, Lee, the kind of work that you're doing. The APIs did not allow for this to happen, and you went ahead and coded this yourself just 3 weeks into the challenge. So we're getting a lot of questions in here, but I'll allow you to give one comment on here before we move on to some other really cool stuff.
Well, the only comment I'd make on that, of course, you mentioned earlier about the mad scientist streak in me. Well, to try and write in 6 weeks an entire teleconferencing app that puts several virtual people in 3D using perceptual capture was a bit ambitious. So I apologize in advance for inflicting that on everybody. But I think it's the future. I was just a little bit previous on that point.
All right. So you did code, I think, almost all night for doing that part. So we have a question from your community, which is, do you see development as a 24/7 project, or do you deliberately switch off evenings? How do you manage your time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one every developer is going to hit at some point. Back in the day, the early years, so the first 2 decades of me programming, developing, things like that, yeah, I do 24/7. I do 3 days straight, simply because I wasn't finished. So I'd carry on until I fell off the chair or had finished what I was doing. In later years, however, you realize that there's such a thing as called working smarter. You don't have to program for 3 days solid to produce great results. If you can actually take something that would normally take you 15 hours and then do it in, say, 2 hours, but you were thinking about it, you actually did it in a smart way, then you've got like 13 hours spare, and then you can do lots of more cool things. So in later years, I've learned to sort of budget my time, strike a bit of a work-life balance. Still not achieved it. I've still not conquered that particular beast. I will often work longer than I ought to. There's always things to learn. But yeah, sure, if you're young, go for it. 3 days solid. See if you can beat my record. But in later life, there's such a thing as working smarter, where you can actually have a bit of a break.
Great. And what about some things that before TGC that you might have done? Or were there any projects or any claim to fame, games that you've done or technology that you worked on that people might know of?
A lot of the early stuff that I'm proud of but nobody knows about, I won't mention for the reason nobody knows about it. The one people might have known or heard about is something called Lego Mindstorms, which is a programmable robot. So everyone knows Lego, you click things together, but this one had a computer inside with motors and light sensors and everything, and behind it was a programming language, and you would actually instruct the robot, to move, turn, detect light sensors and things like that. And the very, very first version of that programming language, and I'm sure Mindstorms is still going, I helped and collaborated on that and was the sort of sole programmer at the end to get it all up and running and working. It's nice to see actually programming then translated into the real world with robots moving around with a programming language that I sort of had a hand in or helped out. And a more recent claim to fame, I only found out today, we're now number 4 in the all-paid Android UK charts, which is like 3 away from Minecraft. So that's pretty cool piece of news, and we're hoping to do better actually in weeks to come. So watch that space. Pretty cool.
What is the app, by the way, that's listed?
It's a driving test success. It's DTS theory. So it teaches learners how to learn to drive, and then when they take the test, it's actually using the actual questions from the test. So once you've learned the app, you can do the test and pass first time. So it's a pretty cool app.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So you moved on, and you work for TGC. You're one of the founders, where you guys create tools. So you're probably not doing as much creating your own apps and games, but you're a tools developer. Was that a calling? I mean, how did you get into that?
I suppose you could argue that I wasn't a very good games designer, because all my games were very strange and off the wall. There was a game called Ergo the Caveman, and you could only walk in one direction. And if you wanted to go back to a previous screen, you just had to walk backwards to get back to previous screens, because I didn't have enough memory to flip the sprite around and animate it in the other direction. And I thought that was a great game, so I got that onto a magazine and in licenseware and got it published. But I think after a while I started to realise games was not my top vocation. But in order to create all these games, I was doing lots of tools, and my last thing I did on the Amiga was it was a what do you call it? A point and click. It was a graphic adventure game maker, so you could actually make your own sort of version of Monkey Island or Simon the Sorcerer or stuff like that. And I'm really good at it, and I really enjoyed it. But as I was finishing the product, the bottom fell out of the Amiga market, and I didn't really have anywhere to sell it. So I reluctantly moved onto the PC, and I've been doing tools ever since.
Oh, wonderful. I was an Amiga owner as well. I played a lot of Psygnosis titles on that. Many nights and weekends burned. So let's talk about your work with TGA. Do you this comes from your community, by the way. Do you remember any defining moment, if any, when you decided to be a games programmer with you guys focusing on games? I mean, there's something that attracted you to the game development market.
I just did what I enjoyed. And at that early time, I didn't really chase what made money. I more chased what I enjoyed doing. And I was fortunate, very lucky, I suppose, that the thing that I enjoyed creating also had a business angle. I could actually sell it. I could sell it and make some money, and that money meant I didn't have to have a real job, in quotes. I could go off and do this thing that I enjoyed. So what you saw really was, this is what I would do. If I won the lottery and I had all the time in the world, that's what I'd be doing. That's what I'd be creating. So it wasn't some grand plan. It's just Lee getting a kick out of those sorts of projects, and that's what you saw.
Well, we work with a lot of game developers, a lot of indie game developers, and it seems like they have a passion for that segment because they're gamers themselves. They appreciate the artistry and the challenge to do a game. So it seems to be very true of this indie market. So you guys develop a tool. You develop many tools for indie developers. So as you guys are looking at the indie market, in your eyes, what defines indie games, and do you believe they should have publishers?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I could just answer how long's a piece of string and leave it at that. But I do have an opinion on indie developers, as opposed to what I would call your Leviathan super developer, who've got hundreds of programmers and huge marketing budgets. And I had to think about what might describe indie best. And the best thing I come up with is freedom. Freedom of creativity, the fact that you can sit down any day of the week and say, I'm going to do something crazy and off the wall and cool. And an indie is brave enough and probably able and allowed to do that. Whereas a large publisher, they have responsibilities, they have people to pay. So they have to come up with success after success after success, and you get a lot of formulaic sort of results out of that. Whereas an indie developer can do crazy things. And some of the best, most successful, in terms of money making, have come from the indie segment. You only have to look at, say, things like the World of Goo and Minecraft and Angry Birds. They just sort of stuck at it and had a play around, and eventually they threw it into the market, and it did incredibly well. And you only see that from sort of that indie mindset. So I don't think that's going to answer the question, but it sort of gives you an idea of what I think an indie is, and they're usually very poor as well. So they're usually doing it for free or for not very much money at all. But that's also cool if they're enjoying it.
Cool. And you guys have two key products. You've got App Game Kit. You've got First-Person Shooter Creator Reloaded. We'd have a question actually online here about App Game Kit, and it's how far do you see App Game Kit going in the future? Without giving away any trade secrets, is there anything juicy that you can tell us that you're heading for?
Well, all the juicy stuff is actually out in the public domain. I can't give you any trade secrets, except that Paul, the chief programmer on it, is working crazy hours to fulfill what is a huge update. This version 2 we're doing basically rounds off all the 3D commands, add all the shader commands, is rewriting the compiler to make it super faster than it currently is. So when version 2 is released, it's going to be a really kick-ass solution. And to establish the credentials of AGK, AGK was used to create. Remember, it's currently the all-paid number 4 chart on Android. AGK wrote that out, and I whipped up the prototype in 2 to 3 weeks. And it only took a couple of more 4 weeks to polish it up, and a couple of more weeks just to sort of get it all tested and stuff. And now that's just riding high and making truckloads of money, because AGK is very quick to develop with. So we can throw out an idea and say, let's start again, and AGK can just keep delivering, and then you've got something that then works across all the different platforms. And because it's already been tested, it should go out into all the stores. So it's just type out AGK V2, and you get a big list of all the stuff that's coming very soon.
Cool. You guys have adopted a community model. Your forums are very active. You often engage your community, and you've really used this involvement approach to your methodology. So we got a question from your forums here. Is they want to know what are the pros and cons of that approach of actually listening to them?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because the community in question will be listening to this interview or probably watching it as a recording later, so I've got to be very careful not to upset them all. But I'll speak from the heart. The negative is that the community wants everything, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But they also want everything right now, and that's not fine, because we're a very small developer and we can only do so much. And we've tried to organize that by putting things in order and then telling everyone what our order is. We've even set up a voting board where you can vote for the features you want. So we're a crowd-funded project, so when you pledge, based on how much you pledge, you get more votes. So you can put more of your votes on the voting board and actually get your idea pushed up the charts, and then we're ready to look at the voting board again. We pick it off the top, and that's the one thing we work on. The positives of the community is just the breadth of ideas and the fact that we're given the ideas that the consumer wants. So we're not wasting our time on crazy features no one's going to use. We're actually creating features that people are then willing to pay money for. And you can't get better than that. They're helping us create the perfect consumable item, the perfect commercial product. And you just can't get better than community involvement for that. And we've been doing our forums for 8 years, 9 years, probably longer. It just goes back so far I can't remember that far back. But we've always had a community element. But this is the first project in Reloaded where we brought them right through the front door, and we've sat them down and said, you are now part of our development team. And they can change what we do day by day. So, and it's worked out great. We've been doing it over a year now, and the results are pretty cool, in my opinion. And I'm going to continue that and probably try and refine it into an even better tool that we can use in the future.
Yeah, and we have a number of questions that we got in, and it seems that most of them are actually around Reloaded. It seems to be very popular with the community, so we'll actually switch to that. And so, folks, if you have Reloaded questions, start keying those up. So first, the what and why of Reloaded. How is it different than a lot of other things in the market that are out there? Why should game developers choose that product over something else?
It's a specialized product. A lot of the other products we're going to be compared against are quite generic. They're sort of like our equivalent of the AGK. We'll give you the programming language, and then you've got to do everything else. You've got to create the art, you've got to write the scripts, you've got to figure out the design, you've got to optimize it, make it faster. And you basically become a programmer, a developer, but now you have to pay some company to sort of have the privilege of writing the rest of your game. FPS Creator Reloaded is very, very different. You could create an FPS game in 5 minutes. The nearest equivalent competing tool, if they can do it in 5 minutes, then I'll eat something. Because we've spent years and years and years and years, all the way back to FPS Creator Classic, which was about 6 years, 7 years ago, thinking about how do we make an FPS game easy to create. Ease of use is the number 1, 2, and 3 of what identifies our product and what makes it unique. It is specialized. Not everyone wants to create an FPS game, But we have ambitions that once the engine's there and we have a great FPS experience, it's only a short step to then put in a third person in and vehicles and then an open world environment and then multiplayer, multi-user, and we just expand that universe out, starting with FPS, which is a very challenging product to start from because an FPS game pushes all the technology barriers. It pushes CPU, GPU, memory. It taxes performance to the nth degree. So whatever computer you got, an FPS game will melt it. And so it's a great first genre to start with. And we're nowhere near finished. We're going to spend a long time getting this FPS formula just right. So that's FPS Creator Reloaded in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Okay, so we have a question for somebody from somebody online here. So they want to know, Lee, how difficult was it to implement real-time dynamic shadows in FPS Creator Reloaded?
Oh, well, actually, I can give the hats off to Intel on this one because I used a piece of source code which was the cascade shadow mapping, where Intel shows you how to take the technique and spread it across as many cores as you've got. And I kind of interrogated that, got the technique out of it that I wanted, and in my traditional style, I went ahead and rewrote the technique in my own image because I needed to understand it. So the only way I knew that was to write it from scratch. It would have been easy just to cut and paste, but no, I needed to sort of understand every little thing. So I did all that, created it, and it worked great. But I was using a kind of a decent card. Well, decent. It was, according to our community, it was a massive high-end card, and I oughtn't to be using such a card. So the community got me to take that card out of my machine and put in not so good graphics card, and then my engine was not as fast as I thought it was. But that was great because then I went back to my dynamic real-time shadow thing. And then I made another technique that would work well on the lower end card, and that was actually quite cool, really, because then when I dropped it onto the Ultrabooks on the integrated graphics hardware, it run great. The techniques that I was using to sort of for best practice, it just opened up the market. I suddenly could sell to a lot more devices. So and it was the it started off with the Intel article, but it went through the community and that rinse cycle a few times. And now we've ended up with a nice shadow system that no one's really complaining about anymore. And from a community feedback point of view, that's a big deal. When the community stop complaining about something, it means you've achieved.
Well, you actually make a really good point there, Lee, is that being able to test across different hardware and actually making sure that you do test for the lower stuff, and it actually opens up a bigger market for you. And I think that's a good lesson for a lot of developers out there. Okay, so we've got plenty more questions here. So do you anticipate Reloaded drawing some gamers back to PC gaming versus console gaming?
I think the console gaming crowd are a pretty hardcore lot. I mean, they get the console for a lot of reasons. I think I could probably drag them back to PC, and I think a lot of them have PCs as well. For game creation purposes, there's only a couple of choices currently in the next-gen console world. And I don't think you're going to find what we're going to offer with FPS Creator Reloaded on the consoles anytime soon. You're going to get something like, but usually they get dumbed down and homogenized, and it's sort of a generic experience where all the games kind of look the same and play the same. So yeah, I think if you want to create a really kick-ass FPS game, then you're going to have to come back to the PC and get this product and start using it, because in a very short amount of time, we're going to be sort of the de facto standard for how to create an FPS game very quickly, and has the right kind of quality that people will take your game seriously.
Great. So we actually have an economic question for you, Lee, so get out your pencil. So the cost of Reloaded is relatively inexpensive, so great for those who are using the product. How will this affect the future of the product and the stability of the company? So, I mean, how can you make something so cheap and be successful?
There's two strategies to that. One, we're a very small team. we don't have a lot of overheads. If you look at our competitors, they're huge. They hire hundreds of people to sort of maintain their product. You know, you could fit our entire team in a small house if you wanted to. We're all spread out. I don't think we'd survive more than a week if you put us all in the same room. But our costs are low, relatively low, so we can last a long time, almost on starvation diet. But another reason for setting it low is it's a simple numbers game. If you set your product so high a price, you're going to get fewer users. If you set your product at a low price, you're going to get more users. And what we've found is that there is actually more money to make if you have a product that's well priced, because you're going to get more users. The more users go out and say, this product is great, and they tell their mates. The mates come along and they buy it, and then they tell their mates. And you end up with a situation where your community becomes your marketing vehicle. And so the more people, the better. So we're okay to set the price low. And on a personal note, I'm kind of, every time I go to some really cool looking solution, and then I go to a website and they don't even tell you the price. They say, contact us for more details. As if the price is so big, we're not even going to tell you what it is on the website. That kind of winds me up a little bit. And even when they do advertise the price, and they cloak it, they say, you know, $15 a month, but they want 12 months up front. But they only find that out when they go to the payment page. Or they hit you with a subscription model, so you're paying out every year for the bug fixes that you should have got for free in the first place. So I've got a bit of a personal gripe on charging people too much money. I think I should charge when I've got something new to give, new model packs, new scripts, new music, new things you can make your game with. But I'm not going to charge you for bug fixes, you know. And in fact, Reloaded, we've had this policy, lifetime updates. When you pledge, you get lifetime updates, which means you're going to get version after version after version, and we're not going to squeeze you for money. So that's our strategy. We're going to just make people happy, and hopefully they'll tell their mates, and then they'll buy it as well.
Awesome, awesome. So in terms of the feedback from the community on the latest project on Reloaded, has there been something that you adopted that makes your development of the project easier?
Yeah. The early days, we just created a version, did a little bit of testing, and then threw it at the community. And they didn't like it very much because it would either erase their levels for them or crash their computer worse than the previous update. And it was just a bad experience by all. And then there was this movement to sort of, and quite a vocal community saying, please test these versions before you give them to us. And we thought we were doing sufficient testing, but obviously not to the standard that the community wanted. So we hired from the community, hired is probably the wrong word, we're not paying them anything. We obtained some members of the community and then locked them in a special group called the Alpha Testers group. And we give each version to those guys first. And if they say, yes, this is great, after a week, then we give it to the community. And that little change has transformed the last two updates as big success stories. Everyone's happy with the last two updates because we inserted that little bit of testing before we unleashed it into the world. And that came from the community, straight from the community.
Yeah, and speaking of community, crowdfunding is pretty popular, you know, in order to try to get something out. And I believe you guys are doing that with the recent project of Reloaded. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that. Do you ever worry that you can't achieve what you said you can? So people are pledging money, and you said you're going to do something. Are you able to deliver on that? In other words, how confident are you on getting all that you said to the pledgers delivered?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. If you look at Kickstarter and all the pledges activity that have been going on, and I wouldn't say a lot, but enough projects just falling flat on their face, and the pledges are left wondering, well, I've pledged, so where's my product? And the exact lettering of crowdfunding is that you're not really buying a product, you're sponsoring a development, and you're going to see if you can get it to where it needs to be. And so we actually failed the Kickstarter. We actually put Reloaded on Kickstarter and it failed. But we like the idea of crowdfunding. So we set up our own crowdfunding and we called it Pledges, and people could pledge and keep it going. And it worked for us. It allowed us to fund the development with a decent-sized team to actually achieve what we needed to achieve, that people are actually pledging into. As to our capability to deliver on our promises, I'll give you a few statistics. I've been doing not just game development, but game tools development for 3 decades. That's 30 years, right? 30 years. If you add up the experience just in tools and games development of their team, it's over 120 years. Now you take that kind of experience, that very skilled select group of people, and you put them on one project and you work them on nothing else, then you tell me whether we can achieve what we are setting out to achieve. I think we're going to only achieve what you expect. I think we're going to exceed those expectations. You just have to keep pledging. Well, anyone that's pledged, don't worry about that last statement. Lifetime updates, we're going to look for new users and we're going to add them to our community.
Wonderful. And we have actually a comment on Reload or a question from people here online. And yes, you told us that you're responsive with your community, and the problem is they're always asking for things. So here's something they're asking for. So do you have a plan in the future to add RPG elements for game developing, new weapons and levels?
Yeah, weapons first. We deliberately removed the rocket launcher and the grenades and the mines because it would require explosions and fire and smoke, and we've not got round to actually adding that yet. So you'll find all the weapons will be coming online first. The RPG elements, we're actually cramming loads of commands into the script system using Lua, and Lua is a programming language in its own right. So with the addition of a few clever commands that hook into the engine, you could create your own RPG elements, inventory systems, shops and stores, conversation dialogues, quests. All that can be done in Lua. You would just need a few commands, and those commands we need to finish off the FPS Creator engine. So by the time we've done that, you'll be able to set forth and do your own RPG scripts. But don't worry about for the people who don't want to program, who don't want to script and stuff. We also, not masters, but we're very aware that we need to do a lot of the work for you. So what you do is just drop in an RPG-style set of elements, and then they all just work. So within 10 minutes, you've created an RPG game. But we're still focusing on FPS. FPS, first-person shooter, is our first goal. And then once everyone in the community say, yes, TDC, you've done great, you've delivered what you said, then we will entertain the idea of RPG, racing games, flying games, third person, aerial, looking down, 2.5D isometric, strategy, puzzles, whatever it is, but we just want to get FPS right first. Let's focus on one thing and do it really good, and then we can look at something else.
Wonderful. There are a couple of questions on marketing here. I just want to let the people know that I will get to those. We'll finish up some questions on Reloaded, and then we'll get to marketing games. So, question here from your forums. Reloaded has been evolving, lots of features being added all the time. Do you ever have a problem all day with the project, and suddenly at 3 o'clock in the morning, the ideas come to you? Do you wait for that, or are you immediately out of the bed at 3 in the morning and you started coding?
3 in the morning. I'm probably still at the computer. I don't need to jump out of bed. I'm already there. I just have to write myself an email. No. Once upon a time, yeah. I would have a eureka moment, and I'd either sketch it down on a notepad, or more recently, you can just email yourself. So you can just grab your phone off your bedside table and write yourself an email, so you'll get it the next day. It's a nice way to retain an idea. But I usually find my best work is now done in the regular hours of, say, 9 till 5. And any eureka moments are going to happen sort of during that time. But yeah, it still happens. You still have an amazing idea, and you simply cannot let it fade. Because you'll have a great idea, and then the next day you'll say, oh, I had a great idea, but I can't remember what it was. So yeah, it's always a good practice to sort of make notes of it, because you know the brain's a strange thing. You'll have the idea that you had the idea, but you don't know what the original idea was, and that's just cruel. So yeah, but not anymore. I usually do more 9 to 5 and get on my eureka moments on schedule.
That's good. You're growing up a little bit, Lee. That's great. But I just got a picture of you in a onesie at 3 a.m. So you can just nod off in front of your computer. So a couple of questions here. A question about being an independent developer, and it's a good question because this is a struggle a lot of developers have. It's really about what product or language to stick with. My gosh, this computer is evolving. The languages are evolving. It seemed like, geez, first it was all about low-level programming. You had to be in C and C++ to get anything out of a game, and now it seems like scripting in HTML5 is all the rave, and a lot being done with that. And you even mentioned Lua, which is a great development language as well here. So, the question is there a TGC product that will be supported for a long term similar to Dart Basic Pro, so the developer feels like, hey, I've got something that I can stick with as these things are kind of evolving around me?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called AGK V2. It's got two flavors. It's got Basic, so if you've never programmed before in your life, you can actually get your first program running in a couple of minutes, and then you have every single command you'd ever need to create an app or a game. And it has all sorts of extra cool things like it can read sensors, it can put advertising in there, you've got in-app purchase controls, you name it, it's in there. But you've also got C++, so you can use the C++ version of AGK, and you can go right down to the metal, so you'll run as fast as the native device will allow. And on a general note, if you was asking my advice, where should I put my bets? What should I start learning? If it's games, and it's games that need performance, then I suggest C++. It's the one I've used for so long, it's sort of, I'm a bit blinkered that that's the one you should be using. Everything else, there's a compromise. There's some abstraction layer that's going to slow down what you've created. Even C# with its managed memory will entail a little bit of performance hit. And games, especially performing games, need every amount of speed they can. In fact, most game developers are struggling to find more speed. It's the constant challenge that you have this vision in your head of what you want your game to do, and you're always working on the performance elements of it to try and get all your ideas to run at full 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second. And that's always the battle for those high-end fast games. But certainly for like the general games like puzzles or take-turn sort of games, or just apps which are information sort of things, yeah, you've got the spectrum of everything. HTML5 is very good for that. HTML5 is almost the ubiquitous language. You can write it in HTML5 and it'll pretty much run on any device that has a screen, basically. So, there are solutions if you want that proliferation. But I'm biased. I'm going to push AGK because it will hit all the major platforms. It already is worked so you can drop them straight into the stores. We've designed it for ease or speed, so you can take your choice. And we're working on it full time. So you take care of the ideas and get them into the store. We'll take care of making it faster and making sure you've got all the features you need to create the game or the app that you want. But like I said, that's a rather biased answer. But what would you expect?
Well, I think it's a good answer. It's actually, for the reviewers out there, it's pretty consistent with what we're hearing from other developers. Everybody has their favorites out there. Windows developers, a lot of people doing C#. Actually, any thoughts on C#? Because that was something you didn't mention.
C#. Yeah, it's a good idea. Taking care of the management of the memory, very difficult to crash because you've no longer got that horrible control of taking pointers and then pointing them at any random part of memory and trying to do stuff with it. And it's, that's often where the bugs end up because you're actually doing something silly, whereas a managed system like C# doesn't let you be stupid. And so you've got fewer bugs, which means you've got better productivity, which means you get your product to market a little bit sooner than the C++ guy who's still struggling trying to find that invisible bug that he simply cannot find. So I like the theory of C#, but then you tell me, here's C#, and I want to take 5% of your performance away. I'm not going to make that deal. I cannot accept that. I spent half my time trying to gain 5%. I'm certainly not going to give 5% of it away. So it's great if speed isn't paramount and your productivity will increase. But I'm old school. I like the hard challenges. So give me C# with its pointers and its crashes any day of the week.
Wonderful. Okay, so we actually have another feature request for Reloaded here, and this comes from Diaper Paralysis, who asks, is the implementation of something such as an option menu to control the graphics volume for a built game going to be added for Reloaded? Is that planned?
Yeah, great question. Definitely planned. As to when, I'm going to wait to see if there's enough people in the community asking for that exact feature. We are going to do an option screen in the standalone game, but we've been very careful to choose the volumes so the music and the sounds and the background audio are nice and blended. We're even considering bringing in a professional sound studio to do those final tweaks and touches so we get a nice audio experience throughout the game. To then drop in that audio menu to let people fiddle with very expensive settings, I'm not sure. If there's enough people in the community saying, we want this menu, you're going to get it. But I need to be convinced. I'm not going to do it for one guy. Maybe 8 people say they want it, I'll do it.
Okay, so there you go, community. Start flooding the forums with diaper paralysis requests. So for sound volume control for the games. Okay, so we have a couple of questions here on marketing, because you guys have been at this for a while. Obviously, you're shown well in the top charts. Let's see, where did the question go? Lee, could you go over the marketing aspect of game development, as well as how one would get their game seen by people, made popular upon release? So, yeah, how do you get your game out there and noticed?
Oh, that's the secret sauce, and I'm keeping it a secret. No, it's a horrible question, because every developer has that same question, and unfortunately, there isn't a single answer to it. If there was, we'd all have that solution, and we'd be back where we started. The basic problem is discoverability. Back in the day, a bedroom programmer could create a game in a couple of weeks. They could get it into a cassette and get it onto a shop shelf, and you've got discoverability. You walk along, you pick up there's only 20 games available on the planet, so you pick up one of the 20 games and you take it home, and you've got your game and you make your money. These days there are millions of apps across countless devices, and you have to be discovered in that noise. Speaking from personal experience, what I found successful is to specialize, is to pick a particular niche that no one's exploited, and you've got some natural affinity toward it, something you enjoy doing or something you're good at doing, and then do that, and then focus all your energies on that one thing. I've made some real bloopers mistakes in business in the past, spreading ourselves too thin, not focusing too much on a particular product. When the product does well, not then bombarding it with more attention, because if you've actually got a success, then you should work on that, you should build on it. We was actually #1 on iOS, a product, it was called IDZ, and it was the #1 free app on the planet. #1. What did we do? We went off and we did 10, 20 different apps, thinking, oh, we'll recreate our success. What should we have done? We should have stuck with that app. We should have done a version 2. We should have done an update every week to stay at that top slot. A bitter lesson to learn. But if you're talking about the grassroots, the bread and butter revenue, how you become a developer and you don't have to go out and get a real job peeling potatoes or something, it's find something you're good at. Identify a niche that the market is not fulfilling at the moment, and then aim for that and create a product and put it out there and focus, focus, focus. And eventually you will be, I like to call it the WinZip of a particular market, because WinZip came out and a lot of other compression tools came out, but it was WinZip. Everyone thinks WinZip when they think of how do you get a lot of files and compress them to make them smaller, and it's like a world-class idea, world-class technology. So that's what I would suggest. Find something, find some niche, and then develop. And then marketing will be a lot easier, especially if you can get a community around it. The one thing we did, we opened a forum. Back in Basic software days, I started a forum. and the forum was very active, and it was full of all sorts of things. But that was my marketing. I had Dirt Basic, and I had my forum. And I created Dirt Basic in a time when everybody wanted a 3D Basic on the PC, and there was nothing even close to it. And then I wrapped it up in a forum, and the community talked about the product, and the community advertised the product for me. And that's how I did it. I did something very niche. So if there's any niches left in the marketplace, then identify them and then work towards creating a product that will fill it perfectly. And then make sure you can get to #1 in that particular category. So it's very generic advice, and maybe it can't be repeated because I've already done it and there's no more niches in the world. But I don't believe that for a second. I think technology changes so quickly. There's always new opportunities emerging. And just to sort of raise a flag for Intel, Intel are the perfect partner to identify those opportunities, because Intel are very often on the cutting edge. They're on the hardware that's coming, the hardware that's coming next. And those are where you're going to find your niches and your opportunities. So it's a good idea to check out what Intel are doing, the opportunities Intel have identified, and then see if you've got any synergy with that and creating products around that. Because you'll be surprised. If you are the first of the thing, you'll make a lot of money. Either be the best or be the first.
Yeah, and thanks for the plug for Intel. We do have some things that help developers get exposure, and it's not that we're always working with large accounts like Electronic Arts or Microsoft or SAP or whoever. The group that I'm in, we are working with the independent developer, and we're trying to find those hidden gems. So I'll give one plug here. Go to intel.com/software/share. If you're developing mobile applications, especially for Android, that's one place where you can put your projects and get a little bit more exposure. And who knows, maybe somebody at Intel will discover you and reach out to you. So check that out. So let's switch that topic then a little bit to you working with Intel. You know, you and I have known each other for 5 years. We've been at many events together, and you are considered what we call an Intel black belt. So tell our audience here what it means to be a black belt, what it means to you.
You get one of these. No, it's a very honoured position actually. There's not very many black belts on the planet, and to be chosen to be one was quite humbling really. At first I didn't really know what it was. But after a while, when I started talking to other black belts, you know, I'm probably sort of like the baby black belt of the group, because a black belt is an expert in their field, someone who's been remarkable in their particular area of expertise and have made themselves available to the public so the public can learn from them, like advocates for a particular field. And then it says, right, Lee, you're a black belt and your speciality subject is software development. I said, okay, great, wonderful. I probably did a little bit of putting information out there in the past, but when I became a black belt, I felt a responsibility to continue to put information out there. So I did crazy things, like I have a daily blog now. I blog every day about technology and things that I've solved, and putting it out there. Every now and again I write an article for Intel to cover some crazy subject that hasn't really got, you know, the publicity it needs. And to be on hand if Intel wants to pick my brains from time to time on certain perspectives of software and development and what's coming next and what a developer might think. So primarily very honoured and humbled, but I also feel a responsibility that at any minute I might get kicked off this wonderful inner circle of black belts. So I'm working hard to stay a black belt, and even have to beat people up from time to time just to prove my credentials, then so be it.
Well, yeah, you've been doing a good job at that so far. So for anybody else who's interested in the program, you can go to software.intel.com, join and learn about the Black Belt program. Everybody who joins our community is given a belt, and as you provide more contributions, your belt status changes. But the Black Belt is the only belt that is granted. So you have to earn that belt, and you're awarded. And I think we have relatively somewhere between 35 to 40 black belts worldwide. So it's a very exclusive group. All right. And through your working with us, we've had you at events as well. You've been to Mobile World Congress. You've been to GDC with us. We've gone to lots of events worldwide. You know, what are some of the interesting things? Because a lot of people who don't work with Intel don't understand, you know, what are the things like that you get to do with us when you go to these events?
Well, you know, I think the best way to describe it is I am there to work. You know, it's not a free ride when Intel say, you know, come to this place and do your thing. I do feel like I have to go there and actually help and contribute, and I hope I do that. But the thing that I remember the most is the people. Every time I go somewhere new, I have like 20 new friends by the time I finish, because it's like it's the kid in a candy store. You're talking shop 24/7. You're at the event. You're seeing all the latest, greatest stuff. You're hanging around Intel staff and people that are actually coming up to the Intel booths and the showcases and stuff. But then it carries on. Then you leave the event. You go out to venues and parties and things like that. And I will never forget till the day I shuffle this mortal curl. I always remember now the App Up Elements party, the first one. And Intel, they must have spent billions entertaining us developers. And it was the most enjoyable party I've ever been to. I won't go into all the gory details, but at one part, the big curtain rose, and there was every arcade machine you could think of from the past. And the way I remember it best was, on either side, I'd written a couple of little arcade games. I think one was called Jumping Jack, and another one was some caterpillar clone thing. And they were up on these big screens, and people could go up to them like arcade machines and play them. And I found out later there was a prize for winning the top score on these games. I only found out later, but I wrote them. I could have actually gone and won them because I knew how to play them because I'd wrote the things, and I didn't know there was a prize at the end. And it was just a whole night of just surprise after surprise after surprise. And I tell you what, if there's one takeaway, Intel definitely know how to throw a party. They really do. And they understand the developer as well. They understand the idea that the developer, you know, they're serious about what they do, but they also like to enjoy themselves. And Intel can connect on that level.
Great. Yeah, you know, it probably gone a little too much on the Intel side. We don't want to make this a big commercial for Intel. We want it. We'd be able to get questions answered from your community, so people understand what a developer like you is all about. So please reach out to us. You can get to me on Twitter at Bob Duffy, BOBDUFFY, if you want to know how Intel can help you. Got a question here, you know, just on some final thoughts. We might have some final questions from the community as well. If there's a gaming genie, if that exists, and they gave you one wish for Reloaded, what would it be?
Only one? You can't
get one wish. And you can't wish for more wishes.
I suppose the genie of the lamp never thought of that. Can I have 100 more wishes, please? Because he'd have to grant it. But, you know, never trust the genie. But, yeah, if it was an honest genie and I really only had one wish, it would probably be to start the Reloaded project about 5 years ago, because I can only dream of what the Reloaded engine would look like if I had 5 years in a time machine and then came back and said, this is the product 5 years from now. You'll see from our history that when we start a project, we work on it for years. You know, we don't just drop it and move on to the next thing. Basic is still in development 8 years later. FPS Classic did for 5 years, and we've just started Reloaded. So it is going to be available in 5 years, and it's going to be available in 10 years. I just wish that the genie would kind of either show me a glimpse of the future so I can get some really good ideas what to code now, or send me back 5 years so I can start working on it then, so I can go back here and have a really great product and probably sell it to sort of everyone on the planet on every device they've got. So we have lots of ambitions, not only to get it done great on the PC, but then migrate it out to all the different platforms. And who knows how many more platforms we're going to have in 5 years' time. So that would be my sort of dream. More time to do the stuff I enjoy.
That's awesome. Okay, so we've got, I think, a couple of questions. Are we going to wrap this up then, folks? Appreciate you hanging in there with us on this. How important do you think VR and Oculus Rift will be, and is there something that TG is adopting? Is this something TGC is adopting?
Yeah, absolutely. We have Rift support already in Reloaded, but it's sort of a skeleton level of support. We can jump into a virtual world and run around, but we're not happy with it. I've played around with Oculus Rift quite a bit, and when you first put it on your head, it's absolutely gobsmacking, and some people throw up, some people fall off their chair, and it's just all very overwhelming. I took to it really, really well. I see it as one possible future for gaming entertainment. But I also saw the opportunity that you can't just take an existing game and slap it into VR and be done. The game has to be designed around the virtual world. And so that's going to take time, and we've got other things that we're doing. But as soon as we have a block of time where we can dedicate ourselves to doing a truly proper VR experience for the FPS genre, then we're going to take it with both hands, and we're going to do a really good job on it. And of course, by then, we're going to have better VR hardware, and we're going to get a lot of stuff out there and really good best practices, and we're going to take the best of that and put it into Reloaded. So that's on a roadmap, but we're being focused. We're going to focus on the important things. Not everyone's going to want to do VR. Not everyone's going to even be able to afford VR. So we're going to do the work that's needed for the majority, and then when the time is right, we're going to do VR, but we're going to do it properly.
Great. And Lee, we have one final question here. We're going to wrap up, and I think we handled all the online questions. So this is regarding FPS Creator, and the question is, I have the first FPS Creator, so kudos to you being part of the classic crowd. Can I use old editions for the FPS Creator Reloaded that I have?
Old editions of...
Yeah, can I use old editions for, what compatibility is there between FPS Creator and Creator Reloaded?
All right, probably almost none. There is a way in which to get all the models and then get them converted so they work in Reloaded, but you're going to end up with models that are like 5 years old, and they're always going to have that about them. They'll be low poly, the textures will be small, they don't have the modern effects that we've thought about. The scripts won't work because it was written in FPI when we're now using Lua. So you can do that if you want to do the work, but my recommendation is just wait. We're actually creating new model packs which look really good, that look like AAA content. We're creating new scripts in Lua which will do a lot more clever things than the old product used to do. So all you've got to do is wait, and then we're just going to put them onto the store. Some free stuff you can download, play that way. So yeah, just wait. We're actually working on that for you right now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so that wraps it up for our questions from the community, and this really wraps up our time here. So, Lee, I want to thank you for taking the time and hanging out late over on your end of the world. We really appreciate having you on this format.
Always a pleasure, Bob.
Okay, wonderful. And I want to hand it over to Keith. And Keith, I want to thank you for allowing us to take over your format of IDZ Live.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, it was actually really interesting. As everybody knows at Intel, I am the most untalented, untechnical person in Intel. They actually make me wear a rubber cowboy hat once a week that says that. But for me, it was actually really interesting too, especially the bit about using the community to actually help shape the product and refine it. Very interesting. Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Bob. That was great. Lee, really nice to see you. Glad that we got the window sorted out. He was getting blasted by the sun earlier. Any more questions? Software.intel.com for all your Intel and technical question needs. Josh, anything you'd like to add before the end of the show?
No, nothing I can think of.
Nothing at all. Okay, well, just say thanks very much for tuning in. We'll be back. We'll keep you updated. We're going to start doing these fairly regularly. As I say, not just on UX. We've got a couple of UX ones coming up, but I think we'll be doing more of these kind of things as well. So if you've any people you'd like us to track down, like dogs in the street, and drag them in front of a laptop, then we'll happily do so. So yeah, you can drive the content in this one as well. All right, Josh, thank you. Always a pleasure, never a chore, etc. and we will see you all soon. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Zach. Everybody. Take it easy. Bye.